Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Startup Societies Foundation podcast. Today, we are joined by Jason Sorens, lecturer at Dartmouth College and affiliated scholar at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University and the Cato Institute. Jason, how do you do today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Absolutely, no problem. So can you just give me a brief explanation of what the Free State Project is?
So the Free State Project is an effort to get 20,000 libertarians and classical liberals to move to New Hampshire, and once there, work to create a freer society.
Excellent. And how did you get the idea for this project? I know it initially started out as a paper, a thesis that you gave.
It did start as a paper, and it was inspired by the thesis I was writing at the time, but my thesis wasn't exactly on this. I was a graduate student, and I was working on a dissertation on secessionist movements in Western democracies. And one of the findings from my research was that most countries are decentralizing power toward regional governments. And the U.S. has gone in the opposite direction. The U.S. has centralized power, states have become less powerful. I figure that if this trend is happening worldwide, it might happen in the United States as well. And I was also intrigued by a finding that when a region has a secessionist movement, it gets more autonomy. So central governments tend to appease independence movements with compromises on political autonomy. So for those reasons, I thought, well, maybe we could get libertarians to concentrate their efforts on a single state. We've been spread throughout the entire country and the world for a long time, and we've produced a lot of good work, but we're still a small minority of the population and haven't been able to really influence policy very much. So if we focused on a single state, not only would we have a lot more influence at the state level, we might also be able to get powers back from the federal government. And so I wrote a little essay proposing this idea in the Libertarian Enterprise, which is an online journal published by L. Neil Smith. And about 200 people emailed me in the first 2 weeks after the essay came out, saying that they wanted to help participate and make this a reality. And so we kind of got together on a Yahoo Club, which was a thing at that time, and worked out the details of the Free State Project.
Okay, wow. And so recently, 20,000 people signed up to say that, hey, if 20,000 people sign up, I'll make the move. So how has that move been taking place ever since it's been triggered?
Yeah, so we have now over 2,000 people who have moved. So over 10% of those who've committed have moved. Now, many of those moved actually before we triggered and reached that 20,000. But we are in an ongoing effort to reach out to everyone who's signed up, and this has been going on for a number of years. We started collecting signatures in September 2001. So we have a lot of people to reach out to, and we've been making phone calls as a first step. And then once we've finished making those phone calls, we will send mail. And if we can't find someone through either of those methods, then we're going to try to find them on social media. So we're using all the techniques at our disposal to try to hunt down everyone who signed up. And we're also continuing to accept new signers, and we're getting a steady flow of new signers using advertising on social media, which was the technique we used to get 2,000 signers in 6 months before we triggered the move. And so we expect to continue to get well over 20,000 signers, and hopefully that will get us within the next 4 or 5 years, 20,000 actual movers. It's a tall order. That's our goal. We may not get that many movers, but the more movers we get, the more significant will be the change that we see in New Hampshire.
It's a really exciting project, and as you know, I've been to a couple of pork fests, and I've got to really soak into some of the culture. After experiencing the culture, and you've moved yourself recently a couple years ago, what are some of the surprising elements of the culture that has formed around the Free State Project?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's the New Hampshire culture, and then there's the kind of Free Stater culture. The New Hampshire culture has been quite welcoming. People are friendly here. It's a congenial state that if you're the sort of person who's kind of live and let live, and you'll take responsibility for yourself. That's basically what the natives are like here. Um, the Free Stater culture, I was talking with one of the speakers we had at New Hampshire Liberty Forum a couple of years ago, who's a prominent libertarian at a DC institution, and he said, this is much more working class than than most of the other libertarian events I'm at. And that's true. What we've got is we've got a big cross section of the libertarian movement who've come to New Hampshire. So it's not, just the academic sorts or the think tank sorts. It's it's people who got energized by, let's say, the Ron Paul presidential campaigns. We got a lot of college students and former college students, young people who've moved up, who are active in those campaigns. We've got a lot of people who have been who've been around a long time. People who were there at the founding of the Libertarian Party have moved up. So it really is a broad cross section of kind of regular folks. We've got a number of different families who've settled, and some regions have been more attractive to families with kids than others. And we've also got a lot of single people who tend to move to the more urban areas, which are still pretty small in New Hampshire. So it's more of a it's more of a political movement than just a group of scholars or something like that. And that's part of the culture. And then there's also if you talk about the culture of the Free State Project, you also have to talk about the kind of social element, which is really the main reason why we really wanted to move, even before the move was triggered, was that we'd made so many friends in the project, and people here really stick up for each other. If some of us fall on hard times or have medical emergencies, things like that, there are always people to step in and help out. And so we found, I think, a really tight-knit subculture within the Free State Project, and that's what you'll find, that there are different subcultures, and you need to find your group. And once you do, it's really a great support network.
And it's very interesting to say that, because of, when people think of libertarians, they tend to think of atomistic, hyper-individualistic, and people who wouldn't be really willing to reach out in large groups. Has that been much of a problem for you guys?
No, not at all. If anything, there's so here's where there is truth to that. So libertarians tend to be self motivated and kind of they prize their individuality, and so you often have a problem of everybody's a chief and nobody's an Indian, as the saying goes. So sometimes you get a splintering of efforts where lots of people want to start different things, and that's something that we'll always face. But on the other hand, there have been effective organizations where people have been willing to volunteer and take a lesser role and not necessarily just do it exactly their own way. So the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance has been a very influential political group in the State House. They've supported candidates, they testify on bills, they rate legislators, and they've been extremely influential and are routinely cited in the media. And they've got a lot of volunteers working for them, including myself. The other thing is I found that that there is a kind of as I mentioned before, a kind of social network among Free Staters, and sometimes that can create drama. That's something to expect, that you'll sometimes find people who have problems with each other, they hash them out in a Facebook group or something like that. I mean, I think that's going to happen with any group of many different personalities. But in a sense, it helps indicate how tightly knit some of these groups are. People care about their reputations. People care about what others think of them, because they know that, well, most of them are expecting to spend the rest of their lives here in New Hampshire, and they want to they want to have a good reputation in the community. So, if anything, sometimes it might get a little too tightly knit. Like sometimes you might think, oh, this is, there's a little bit of of groupthink going on here, a little too much drama. That might be one of the issues you face when you move. Of course, you can opt out of that by not participating in some of these forums. But I haven't found that being too individualistic in the sense of simply dropping out and not relating to others has been a problem at all.
So, and one of those divisions that has been made is it's one that you didn't predict. You thought that Free State Project would be a purely electoral exercise. And one of the divisions is between people that want to do electoral politics and vote and run for office. And then there's this another group that is almost anti-voting, the agorist route. And for listeners who don't know what agorism is, it's a method of doing business activities or counter economics that is sort of gray market or black market. Can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts about that sort of faction within the Free State Project?
Yeah. So I think, there are people who practice both of those, by the way, and it doesn't necessarily line up neatly with ideological views. So you have anarchists who participate in the political process and are kind of skeptical, even some who are skeptical of agorism and civil disobedience. And then you've got people who might be ideologically moderate, but they're basically not interested in the electoral side, and they participate in the kind of free market events that go on around the states. We have community markets in different parts of New Hampshire that take place regularly, or they do things like education and homeschooling. So by and large, I think the different factions have, despite their strategic disagreements, have played together well. Where you have had drama emerge is where you've had someone who engages in an act of civil disobedience, associates it with the Free State Project, and that act of civil disobedience is in some way controversial or unlikely to get public support. So if there was a case in Keene, New Hampshire, where you had people who were filling parking meters. They call themselves the Robin Hooders.
This was on the Colbert Report, correct?
Yeah, they got on the Colbert Report and were expectedly satirized by Colbert. And a couple of them were open carrying and trying to get into arguments with the meter maids and telling them to quit their jobs and stuff like that. And so there was a lawsuit. The city of Keene sued the Robin Hooders. That suit was thrown out.
So the meter maid said something ridiculous, like he was a veteran. He's like, "Yeah, this was worse than Iraq."
Yeah, that's right. So there was some silliness on both sides there, but that was a case where a group of people were doing something good. A couple of the more obstreperous types sort of ruined the potential PR value of what they were doing and undermined some public support. So that's where you get criticism from both sides, where someone thinks that what someone else is doing is going to bring them into disrepute, right? That they're going to now be looked down on as a free stater because some other free stater did something that gets into the public eye, and that goes both ways, right? It's not as if everyone who's been politically active has always done the right thing or done what's politically astute. So you will get some of those kinds of arguments from time to time.
So there's a lot of controversy within the Free State movement, which is just normal entropy that exists within any movement. But it's also coupled with a very controversial proposition, meaning your intention for the project in the first place, which is secession. How does the Free State Project move from one, trying to get libertarians all into one place, and to the eventual goal of seceding from the Union?
Yeah. So the Free State Project actually doesn't have a stance on secession. My original essay had a line where I said that we ought to consider secession and use that as a bargaining chip to get more powers from the federal government. So that was in the original essay. It didn't make it into the ultimate plan for the Free State Project, that this was something we were formally going to seek. And there are Free Staters who support secession. There are Free Staters who oppose secession. So it's really something, if I could go back, I probably wouldn't have put that in the original essay at all, because it's kind of been a club for statists to beat us with and say they want to take over and secede, and it makes us look like extremists. We definitely, I think almost all of us would favor, at minimum, moving toward robust 10th Amendment federalism, where the federal government really is simply there to resolve disputes among the states and ensure a common market and common defense, and basically leave all economic regulation and criminal justice up to the states and localities. We definitely all support that, I think. But whether we go beyond that and how far beyond that is something where there's an active debate among Free Staters themselves and among Granite Staters, right? People here in New Hampshire. It's something that comes up from time to time. The legislature will often consider sovereignty resolutions that declare that New Hampshire is self-governing. My personal view on those resolutions is that they're unnecessary, because New Hampshire already has a state constitution that guarantees the right of secession and declares that New Hampshire is a free and independent state. So, so New Hampshire already has the constitutional tools. If at some point in the future independence looks like something that would benefit New Hampshire, we already have the tools to achieve that.
So rather than secessionism, would it be better if activists move towards more a push towards localism? And not trying to remove themselves from the union, but simply say that laws within New Hampshire have to be more decided on the municipal level rather than at the state level?
Yeah, I think that is a valuable trend, and New Hampshire is already one of the most decentralized states in that sense. Very little is done by the counties. The counties have jails and nursing homes, and that's it. That's the only things they do. So almost everyone lives in an incorporated town. There are a few unincorporated areas where you will not have local property taxes. You'll pay a small county and state property tax in most of them, although I think there are actually a couple of unincorporated areas where your property tax bill would actually be zero. So there are a few of those unincorporated areas, but most everyone lives, 99% of the population lives in incorporated towns and cities. And those towns and cities have ample autonomy to set their own budgets, to run schools, to manage roads, police, fire, municipal parks and services. Right, all that stuff is done at the town level, and there are lots of towns. There are more than 220 incorporated towns and cities in a small territory. So it's very easy for you to choose which town you want to live in, and to choose one that has the mix of services and taxes that you would most prefer. So there are low tax, low services towns, and there are high tax, high services towns. There are towns with strict zoning regulations. There are towns with no zoning regulations. And so you have ample choice. I mean, right now I'm living in one of the highest taxed, highest zoned towns in the state. Because
the irony.
Yeah, that's right. We happened to find a cheap rent here, and it was close to both work and my daughter's private school. But but the town just to the north and the town just to the southeast both have no zoning. So, you do have choice here, and it also is easy to affect town government. You have direct democracy at the town level. If in cities, you have city councils and mayors, but in towns you have town meeting. And those town meetings they can be run in various ways, but the bottom line is that all the townspeople get to vote on the budget. And at one point, we were tracking the effect of Free Staters on town budgets. This was a number of years ago. I think it was 2008 we did this study, and we found that it was several $1,000,000 in lower budgets and lower property taxes that you could attribute simply to Free Staters making the difference in town meeting votes.
2008 now, so it could be way more than that.
That's right. It would be much more by today. And that doesn't even count Free Staters influencing others, which I know has been a big deal as well. I've got a friend in a nearby town, Wentworth, who undertook a campaign one year to just show everybody how poorly the school is performing as one of I think it was the third worst performing school in the state, and how high their property taxes are. So they were spending $25,000 per student. And so they got, I think, a 20% cut to the school budget through at town meeting. So, I'm not actually the sort of person who says we just need to cut everything 100% right now, because as long as you have government schools and government roads, right, you've got to maintain them. But nevertheless, we can often manage these things much more efficiently, much more frugally, until we can figure out how to privatize them. So, that was an important victory, I think. And so she saved her town a lot of money by engaging in this campaign and influencing the townspeople to vote for this.
Wow, Jason, you've had a lot of impact from an essay that you expected nothing to happen from. For the last question, let's take an eagle's eye view. What are some of the most impactful and feasible steps the Free State Project can take in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I am focused in two areas personally, and I try to find my comparative advantage and focus on them. I'm on the board of directors of the Free State Project. And I still think we need to get more people to New Hampshire. And if you're listening to this, you should come and visit, even if you're not sure whether you're moving. If you think you probably will never move, come and visit. Come to Pork Fest, come to Liberty Forum, or even if you're coming outside those times, you can come and visit. We've got a Liberty calendar, nhcalendar.org, where you can find out what's going on around the state. You should also send us an email, though, and let us know you're coming, and we can set up a meet and greet. You can see for yourself what's going on here. It's pretty exciting to experience it. At Pork Fest, we have a kind of true free market that goes on for a week in Agora Valley, right, where people are buying untaxed, uninspected food and paying for it with Ethereum, right, or Bitcoin or whatever.
I bought a hot dog with a copper coin one time.
Yeah, that's right. So it's just kind of neat to see this going on. It's a little more regular than it used to be when NPR Planet Money came to Pork Fest and reported on being served a beer by a 9-year-old. We're not allowed to do that anymore, but but you can certainly find a lot there, and what you can't buy, there's an ample sharing economy as well. So come and visit, see what's going on, and we want to just get more Free Staters here, and we think that once you come and visit, you'll want to stay. The second thing I'm working on is changing the political culture and intellectual culture in New Hampshire long-term by engaging in education. And so I run a program called Ethics and Economics Challenge for high school students. It's an after-school program. And we're not trying to just pump out libertarian propaganda here, but what we are trying to do is expose the students to lots of different ideas and engage in a kind of Socratic dialogue about those ideas and make them better thinkers. And we think a lot of them will eventually become libertarians, just because I happen to believe that that's the most reasonable political philosophy. Many of them won't, but it will at least expose them to the ideas. And so the students participate in that, and they get free books. We give them Mills on Liberty, Locke's Second Treatise, Milton and Rose Friedman's Free to Choose, a bunch of classic works in economics and moral philosophy that will introduce them to the ideas of liberty. The schools love this, the students love it, the parents love it. They're getting an enrichment opportunity that they just don't get in high school, and it may well bear fruit down the line. So those are the two areas that I'm really focusing on myself.
Excellent. And thank you so much for all your work and for joining us on the show. Everyone, if you want to hear content like this and listen to wonderful, innovative people like Jason Sorens here, join us at the Startup Society's podcast. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Joe.